street books, and we just love them. We've had other events here. We had Spooky Sips. Maybe you came to some of our Spooky Sips events. That's our Halloween event. And if you've been there, you will recognize Javon and Singa, who comes and tells spooky stories because he's the author of the Walking Dead books.
They call me Spooky.
So he's here tonight as well. We're really excited. We have 5 amazing authors, some who've been writing for years, some who have written their first books. It's just really, I'm so happy that you all made it here. I do want to remind you that we have very, very cool raffle prizes. We only have 2. One is a bag of all of their books, and mine. Mine is about teaching people to read, so I threw it in there with theirs, just to be among good company. And the second is for our gala, which will be on June 5th. 2 tickets for the gala, they're $150 each. So that's a pretty good raffle prize, even for $5. We are going to get going. We are on Facebook Live. So I would like everyone to please right now turn off your phones and anything else that might make noise during the event. We want all of our followers on Facebook to be here with us. So you guys, don't turn on your phones either. And I would like to introduce, so first of all, I just want to say, is there anyone who really doesn't know anything about Literacy Chicago? It's okay. Raise your hand. Okay, yes, we got some new people. So Literacy Chicago is the oldest literacy organization in the city of Chicago. We are 57 years old this year. Of course, I'm only 35. I was not there in the beginning. 35 forever, right? And we provide education for adults. Anyone 18 and above who needs to get, who needs to get a GED, who needs some help getting a job, who wants to become a citizen, who needs some digital literacy training, and for people who can't read. Do you know that practically 1/3 of our city, of American English speakers, cannot read? It's very scary, and we're trying to do everything we can to solve the problem. We need your help. If you know anyone who can't read, tell them about us, because they can't read. So what's the point of putting up signs, right? I'd also like to introduce our executive director, Rich Dominguez. Please put your hands together. He is the most amazing boss, amazing friend, amazing man. I'm his director of program development, but basically when he tells me go do something, I do it, If you're a non-for-profit, you got a lot of hats, caps, feathers, all kinds of things. So I'm going to turn this over to a well-known Chicago storyteller who also happens to be a volunteer. In fact, we have quite a few volunteers. Raise your hand if you're a volunteer. Look at that.
All right.
2 of our authors. 2 of our authors. Steve is a volunteer. He's a storyteller. He's making it on the airwaves with stories from The Moth, where he's won many competitions. And that's where I first met him, but we didn't know we knew each other until he joined up for training. So Steve is your maître de cérémonie ce soir, and let me introduce Steve.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. I'm Steve Blickman, and I tell stories on stages, like Joanne said. The Moth is one place where I've told a lot of stories, and I've been on the Moth Radio Hour a few times. Just recently, if you listen to NPR, you might have heard that show. I was on the holiday special in December, and then again on the Valentine's Day special just a couple weeks ago. You can catch my stories on the Moth podcast or on their website, where all of their stories live forever on the internet. But I was a software engineer. Storytelling doesn't pay the bills. So for 35 years I was a software engineer. That was my day job until I retired a year and a half ago. And for 3 months I binged watched Netflix and I slept till noon. And then I was bored out of my mind. And I thought there must be more to retirement than this. So I talked to a wise old retired friend, and he suggested that I teach English. Because he said, you speak it pretty well. And a lot of people need help. And he lives in Toledo, and he was a tutor for some Ukrainian immigrants, and he said it really was meaningful for him. So I thought, why not? So I Googled teaching English, and I found Literacy Chicago's website, and I signed up for training, and I met Joanne, and the training was great, and yeah, Joanne leads the training, with some volunteers too. And at the end of the training, Joanne asked me to teach a class, and I thought, whoa, because most people, when they finish training, they're assigned to tutor 1 or 2 people. So Joanne must have seen something in me, or she must have been desperate. Probably the latter.
No.
No, you were desperate. I know you were desperate. So I said, I thought I was up for a challenge, and I thought, why not? So I said yes, and I was assigned to teach digital literacy, which is actually computer skills. But I also teach literacy, so it's kind of like a class that mixes computer skills with English skills, because it turns out if you don't read, you really can't use the internet, because the internet is full of words. So my classes are a mix of literacy and computer skills. And after 2 months of doing that, I really liked it, and Joanne asked me to teach a second class. And I thought, well, I'm up for the challenge. And I did it, and it's also a digital literacy class, so now I'm teaching 2 classes, and that's enough. Now. But it's been super rewarding. It has made my retirement, now I'm a year and a half in, so fulfilling, and I really enjoy standing up in front of a group of people and talking. You know, I've done it with storytelling, and teaching in a class, it's just a variation of that, really. So anyway, this organization is fabulous. Joanne and Rich are so passionate. They're such passionate advocates for literacy. And all the volunteers here I work with are fantastic. They're smart, they're fun, and my students are so appreciative. They come every week ready to learn, and I learn as much from them as they do from me. And that sounds like a total cliche, but it is so true. And actually, I just have to share one anecdote.
Okay, because we want to get on with it.
I know we do want to get on with it. You know what? I won't share the anecdote. Every week, it's something. I hear something from the student.
How about you share it at the end?
At the end. Okay, I'll share at the end.
You know, we're going to give you
Okay.
something to wait for.
And if we run out of time, you can come up to me after we're over a glass of wine. I'll let you know. But anyway, so let's get on with the show. I'm going to introduce our first author, Linda Gartz. 6-time Emmy-honored Linda Gartz is a documentary producer and author of the award-winning book Redlined. Her TV work has aired on all the major networks and Investigation Discovery. Her educational videos include Begin with Love, hosted by Oprah Winfrey, and Grandparenting, hosted by Maya Angelou. Gartz has been published in local and national magazines and newspapers, including the Chicago Tribune. She earned her BA and MAT from Northwestern University and studied at the University of Munich. To learn more, go to her website, lindagartz.com. Give it up for Linda.
Hi, everybody. As you heard, I'm Linda Gartz, and I wrote the book Redlined. I will tell you very briefly, this book was inspired because after my mom died, I discovered thousands and thousands of pages of letters, diaries, documents, photos. We filled 25 bankers boxes with the good stuff and then filled a dumpster too. So as I found these letters and diaries, I thought there's a book here somewhere, but what is it? And I knew I had to focus certainly on the redlining that occurred in our neighborhood. So I'm going to read you the chapter called Redlined. Okay, Redlined. 1950s. Like most major cities in 20th century America, Chicago was rigidly segregated. African Americans were clustered primarily in Chicago's near west side and in the south side's Black Belt, a strip of land that stretched from about 28th Street to 70th Street in 1940 and inexorably expanded as blacks flocked to the city. Chicago's black population had been burgeoning in these two neighborhoods ever since the beginning. Whew.
Let that pass.
Can everybody hear that okay back there?
Yes. Yeah, okay. I'll start that sentence again. Chicago's black population had been burgeoning in these two neighborhoods ever since the beginning of the Great Migration, when vast numbers of Southern blacks moved to northern cities in California, starting near the end of World War I and gaining steam in a second wave after World War II. In the 1940s and 50s, 3 million blacks fled north from the daily degradations and abuses of the Jim Crow South. Hundreds of thousands headed to Chicago, where the black population nearly tripled from almost 278,000 in 1940 to more than 812,600 in 1960. Like my parents, many whites remain unaware that this massive population shift was underway, or the reasons behind it. They just knew they didn't want African Americans moving into their white neighborhoods. Most whites were certain that blacks brought decay and dilapidation into every community they entered. When I was young, we sometimes drove through African American neighborhoods on our way elsewhere and witnessed blight firsthand. Sagging porches, dirty windows, no grass, only twisting weeds in dusty front yards, ill-clad little children playing in the street with no evidence of nearby adults. A ferocious white backlash erupted when blacks moved into an all-white area. In July of 1953, a black couple purchased a home in all-white South Deering on Chicago's south side. For months, white crowds protested and rioted, hurling bricks, shooting off pistols, and attacking and injuring black passers-by. One of the picketers proclaimed to a CBS reporter that she didn't want blacks in her community because, and I quote, "Every place they've taken over, they've turned into a slum," end quote. Whites were certain blacks would devastate their communities, and alongside that would destroy whites' greatest investment, the value of their homes. In her epic book about the Great Migration, Isabel Wilkerson writes, "It was an article of faith among many people in Chicago and other big cities that the arrival of colored people in an all-white neighborhood automatically lowered property values. That economic fear was helping propel the violent defense of white neighborhoods. The fears were not unfounded, but often not for the reasons white residents were led to believe." And that's the end of the quote from Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns. Years later, I learned that the real culprits behind the decrepitude and the lowering value of white homes in integrating communities were the policies of the federal government in alliance with the real estate and mortgage sectors. In the 1930s, the newly created Home Owners Loan Corporation, also called HOLC, H-O-L-C, along with the Federal Housing Administration and other government agencies, began ranking communities to assess their credit worthiness from A, green, the highest, through D, red, the lowest. Quote, "If a neighborhood had black residents, it was marked as D or red, no matter what their social class or how small a percentage of the population they made up. These neighborhoods' properties were appraised as worthless or likely to decline in value. In short, D areas were redlined or marked as locations in which no loans should be made for either purchasing or for upgrading properties." The FHA supported these biases. It relied on color-coded maps to determine, quote, "the present and likely future locations of African Americans and used them to determine which neighborhoods would be denied mortgage insurance," end quote. And that's from one of the books I used for research. FHA insurance was typically denied to buildings in these redlined areas. Without mortgage availability, whites couldn't sell their homes, except to blockbusters, unscrupulous real estate agents who used race baiting to scare whites into selling fast and cheap for cash. The blockbusters then sold the property to African Americans at sometimes 2 to 3 times the value of the building. Homes to blacks in the redlined areas were usually sold on contract, meaning the deed to that property remained with the seller, who could repossess the home after even one missed payment. So a black family could maybe pay 85% of this contract, and if they missed one payment, their house would be repossessed and they'd lose all their money. White families like ours didn't consider the rampant employment discrimination that reduced blacks' incomes, meaning most could afford only older properties, already in disrepair when purchased. Little money remained for upkeep. With the husband and wife often both working to pay off their contract and no loans available, neither the time nor the money existed for repairs. Then there was the insidious role that segregation itself played in the decay whites observed. The 30,000 African Americans arriving in Chicago each year during the 1950s were forced into the limited housing stock of strictly delineated black neighborhoods in the Black Belt and near West Side. Toilets broke, closets were turned into makeshift kitchens. With so many people crammed into inadequate housing, buildings and community infrastructure crumbled under the strain. But most whites never made the connection. White homeowners judged what they observed, placing blame for the rundown homes and lowered property values in racially changing neighborhoods squarely on the new residents. Consequently, white homeowners believed they had a strong economic incentive to keep blacks out.
Okay, let's have a 1 minute pause. We have some people that came in. Could you come in and sit down, please, and join us? We'll wait for you to get settled so you don't miss anything else. Hello, wonderful friends who are coming in. There's a seat up here. I don't know if there are any two seats together.
You'll be fine.
Come on in.
Thank you, Miss Joanne.
You're welcome, Miss Cheryl. We don't want you to miss anything.
And we're doing Q&A at the end, right? Yeah, so there will be Q&A for all the authors at the
I
end.
would like to hear it again for Linda, who is, by the way, a new volunteer and teaching people to read. Yay!
Okay. While they're sitting, I can introduce Howard. Yeah. All right, thanks again, Linda. All right, our next author is Howard Rosenzweig. Howard is a PhD organic chemist and did research for many years. He also composes songs including blues, jazz, and love ballads. He is the author of 2 political thrillers, A Coup of Sorts and Project RVW, as well as his one-act play Never Revealed. He is happily married to Maria Papadopoulou, an internationally recognized PhD organics chemist. Give it up for Howard Rosenzweig.
My book is a sci-fi political thriller, and it deals with a research scientist working on a secret NASA-sponsored project, which ends up becoming a whistleblower of it, despite the success he brought to solving its main goal, to enable long-range space flights far more distant than our moon. A main theme of my book, though, is the tragedy that occurs when medical doctors fail to obey the Hippocratic Oath, as it happened in Nazi Germany, other nations, which sadly included the United States. So I'm going to read for part of chapter 1. Mansfield Correctional Facility, Elbow Creek, Louisiana, 3 a.m., February 10th, 1987. Samuel Jennings felt very nervous when the 2 guards came to his cell on death row, even though he wasn't scheduled for execution. Once they shackled his legs and arms and started walking him out of his cell, he breathed a sigh of relief. They didn't have me get into a diaper, he thought, which was standard procedure before an execution. They led him through a doorway and down a short flight of steps to a tunnel. Some 80 feet straight ahead would bring them to another short flight of stairs leading up to the execution chamber, which in the state of Louisiana is done by lethal injection. About halfway there, they turned left to a door affixed with a sign, RVW Lab. Only authorized people may enter. Hey Jennings, don't worry. It could have been much worse. We could have taken you to the death chamber. as the guard named Poe passed his ID card over the scanner and the lab door opened with a click. They brought Jennings in, closed the door, and one of the doctors there pointed to a flat, cot-like gurney resting atop a 4 feet tall rectangular wooden crate for the prisoner to be placed there. Jennings looked around the lab and saw about half a dozen men and one woman milling about their stations. Unknown to him, this room originally was solely a medical emergency room in the unlikely event that the prisoner's execution was commuted shortly after the execution had begun, and then the technicians would attempt to resuscitate the poor bastard. Unknown to Jennings as well was that this secret lab was now part of a NASA-sponsored project to enable long-range space flights far more distant than our moon. The guards removed his shackles and told him to undress completely so he could get into a Speedo bathing suit. He felt shy with the lady standing nearby and hesitated, Jennings pointing to her. "She's seen many men naked," Poe reassured him, to which she glared angrily back. "I meant as a doctor," Poe retorted. Once in the bathing suit, they then laid him down on the gurney, which had slats of strong polyester bands arranged both horizontally and vertically for the bedding with enough space between them to allow liquid to flow through it. 2 technicians came over and proceeded to shave the hair from various locations on his chest. They attached electrodes to those shaved areas so that a constant monitoring of his heart could be done via EKG. Once the technicians gave the thumbs up, the guards came over and began to secure Samuel's wrists and ankles with leather belt straps connected to the gurney. Samuel became very agitated and frightened, his eyes widening in fear. Matthew Amas, a doctor that his nearby colleagues pronounce his name behind his back as Am-Ass, came over to try to reassure him. "Don't worry, Sammy. We need to restrain you for your own safety." Something in his tone caused a chill through his spine. Unbeknownst to Samuel, but common knowledge to the other doctors present, was that Dr. Amas was lucky to get this job, since he had lost his medical license in Illinois after multiple complaints that he pushed too many patients to undergo unnecessary chemotherapy. His hospital settled out of court with many patients, many of the victims, to try to keep the scandal from coming out, but he and the hospital are still afraid that those who wouldn't settle might take out a class action suit against him. Dr. Ehrenfeld, the senior scientist and medical group leader, listening nearby, came next to them and said, "That's right, Mr. Jennings. The restraints are there just to prevent you from removing the electrodes by accident. We need to be able to constantly monitor your condition so that we can stop the experiment before it's too late." As Ehrenfeld gently touches Jennings' head, "Before we place you in the cold water bath, we want you to get used to breathing through this full-face triangular diving mask that will affix to your head. I've seen that kind of mask used at the Chattanooga Aquarium, where they were demonstrating feeding fish underwater," Jennings said. "That's right, Samuel. We'll feed you air through the hose connected to it so you'll be safe underwater. Once we feel you're relaxed enough, we'll give you some anesthetic intravenously to put you under briefly, so you won't feel pain when we drop you quickly into the chilled water tank over there," as Ehrenfeld points to a transparent lucite tank, 10 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet, filled 3/4 with crystal clear water near the lab center. "Won't I need to be connected to a respirator while I'm anesthetized?" Jennings asked, concern on his face. Dr. Ehrenfeld has a surprised look on his face. "How do you know that is usually a concern, Mr. Jennings?" "I used to work as a surgical technician." "Well, Samuel, we're going to use an experimental anesthetic called propofol. It's actually approved for use in Europe, but it's still awaiting FDA approval here in the States. By giving it in a low enough dose, we can put you lightly under for only 5 to 10 minutes, during which time you can still breathe on your own. We then hope that the cold water will lower your metabolism to a slow enough point that your heartbeat and respiration will continue smoothly, but at a much lower rate." At the far corner of the lab, a recent transfer to the RBW project, Dr. Reynolds grabs Dr. Amas by the arm and whispers, "Why does Dr. Ehrenfeld treat the prisoner so politely and shares this sensitive information with him?" Amas smirks and whispers back, "Because whether the experiment is successful or not, the prisoner will never be allowed to leave Mansfield alive." Randall's look of shock brings a smile to Amasa's face. And stop there.
Thank you, Howard.
Welcome.
All right, our next author is Anne Laughlin.
Woo!
That's right. Anne Laughlin is a multiple award-winning author of 7 crime novels. She is the 2022 recipient of the Alice B. Medal for her body of work. In addition to writing fiction, Anne serves on the board of Mystery Writers of America and writes for the Gay and Lesbian Review. She lives in the Rogers Park neighborhood of Chicago. Put your hands together for Anne.
Thank you very much. What a crowd. It's great to see. I'm going to read from Clean Kill, my 7th novel, and I'm just going to set the stage quickly because I'm starting a little further into the book. The protagonist of the book is a former homicide cop named Nikki Sullivan. And Nikki basically drank her way out of the Chicago Police Department and became, after 5 years of sobriety, became a resident manager at a sober living home for women. One of the residents, a woman named Lou, was evicted from the house, accused of stealing some money from the house, and Nikki doesn't think she did it. So she's out looking for her, very concerned about what will happen to Lou out on the streets. Nikki headed out to the first gay bar she could think of that Lou might have gone to. As part of her recovery, Nikki had stayed away from bars as if they were plague infested, but now she parked in front of one in Andersonville, hoping to find Lou, or at least some hint as to where she might be. Donna's was huge by lesbian bar standards, with 3 large rooms and an outdoor patio. Nikki had spent a fair amount of time there when she wasn't in a cop bar, usually when she thought it would be a good idea to hook up with someone. She treated the bar not so much as a drinking establishment, but rather as a sort of 7-Eleven for sex, a place to stop on the way home to pick up what she needed. The main room featured a charmless bar that looked to be constructed of plywood and formica. She imagined the tool-belted crew of lesbians building the bar in exchange for beer. All the spindly stools were occupied. Nikki stood awkwardly, trying to decide where to settle. 2 women pulled away from the bar and headed toward the dance music in the back room. Nikki slipped into a spot and instantly felt at home as the heels of her boots clicked into place on the lower rung of the stool, and she leaned forward with her elbows on the bar. It was a single fluid movement that gave her a sense of comfort, as if a muscle memory was exercised. A bartender appeared in front of her and grabbed a bottle of vodka from the well, the sound of glass clanging against the metal, bringing an ocean of memory over her. She fully expected a shot to appear in front of her, next to a bottle of Pabst. The bartender was new since Nikki had been there last. "What do you have?" she asked. "Coffee." She wasn't surprised to get a cup of undrinkable sludge, worse than anything she had had at the station house, but it served its purpose of not looking like any of the drinks around her, to prevent her from accidentally picking up the wrong glass. It's not that she wanted a drink, but she didn't entirely trust herself to not find one magically in her hand. A woman about Nikki's age sat on the empty stool next to her. She looked familiar, but there was no memory attached. She had short dark hair, an athletic body, and a face that was handsome but pockmarked. She ordered a beer and waited for it before turning to Nikki. "Do I know you?" she said. "You might. You look familiar to me." "Me too, but I haven't a clue where we met." They were silent for a bit, Nikki staring at her mug of coffee, the other woman downing her beer. "I'm Colleen." "Nikki, were you ever on the softball team?" Colleen was sitting sideways on her stool, studying Nikki. "Never." "Dykes on bikes?" Nikki grinned. "No." Colleen finished her drink and ordered another before turning back to Nikki. "Did we sleep together?" Nikki didn't know if they had, but it seemed the most likely explanation, and it wouldn't surprise her at all. "I'm sure if we did, I'd remember it." Colleen shrugged. "I don't know. No offense, of course, but I'm not so young anymore, and there have been a lot of girls." Nikki guessed there'd been a lot of booze, too, but no sense mentioning that. Colleen ordered a shot and offered Nikki one. No thanks, I'm good. She nodded at Nikki's coffee cup. Not drinking tonight? How easy it would be to order a beer. There wasn't a soul in the bar that knew Nikki had quit, and one who would be delighted to buy her a drink. It seemed the most natural thing in the world to say yes. I'm afraid I drank up my quota of booze. Now I stay away. One day at a time, right? That's what they say. Then why come to a bar? I'm here trying to find someone. Maybe you know her. Colleen started peeling the label off her beer bottle. Did you lose a girlfriend or something? No, it's someone I'm worried about. Her name is Lou. Don't know anyone named Lou. She's big, about 6 feet, stocky, buzz cut. Sounds charming, Colleen said, but I don't think I've seen her here, not that I noticed. A woman wormed her way to the bar on the other side of Colleen, giving her a kiss on the cheek, and Nikki knew she'd lost her. She gave up her bar stool and wandered to the back room to look at the dancers. She thought it was as likely she'd see a grizzly bear on the dance floor as Lou, but she'd learned long ago to be thorough. There was a billiards room off to the side of the dance floor. She slipped by the dancers and swung the door open, the noise from the music nearly disappearing as soon as the door swung shut behind her. Every head turned to her, as if she'd just walked into a Western saloon with her shooting hand on her gun belt. Thank you.
Excuse me, we have had a request for a 10-minute break
Oh,
for drinks, and it gives you a chance to buy raffle tickets, but we're gonna time it. Let us have minutes.
All right.
Because, you know, we want you to have time at the end to talk with the authors. So it is, right now, 6:51, so we will start reading at 7, what is that? Oh, 1.
oh, wow.
All right?
All right, go refill your cups.
Go
Take time.
refill, if you walked in late, the raffle tickets are a bag of all the authors' books and 2 tickets to the gala, 2 prizes, not all in one. So, welcome to the people who weren't able to get here for Linda's reading. We are live on Facebook, so you'll be able to go back and watch it there. So we see you in 10 minutes. Now it's 9.
Sorry, I can't read those, so I didn't know what you were telling me. Yeah, I didn't know.
You can stop it. We'll be back in 10 minutes.
It's gonna finish. I think we should just have one long recording with everything.
Yeah, it might like end it. And then No, we're fine. Everyone's staying. I mean, we have the space till 8, right? We only have 2 more stories left, so we're fine.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. We're running out of time.
Yeah.
Well, I think I will get mine right. Where's mine? They're up at the front of the counter, like way at the
Good. Oh, I'm gonna turn the microphone off.
Yeah. You don't need to do. unfortunately so. Don't feel rough.
On time.
Well done. 30 seconds. You're doing great.
Well done. Well done, Howard.
Let's check. You guys are pretty good. It is exactly 7:01. Before we get started, we're going to start with the next part of our show. I do want to say a special thank you to, Linda and Ann, because they both joined Literacy Chicago as volunteers. And I think it's just amazing to have people who are so talented, who are also willing to give us their time. We have, Ann has also won a lot of awards for her book. We have all these award-winning people here. And you'll hear from another one in a few minutes, but it just warms my heart. You think that people who are so famous and so big that they wouldn't look at us and do something. And my boss is telling me to stop, so
Before that, can we give Joanne a round of applause? This night would not happen
you weren't
without
telling me to
her.
stop?
No, so you smile.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going.
Photo op.
Take a picture of me and Steve.
All right, hold on.
Steve and me, that's more correct.
Jeez.
This way, Joanne. Okay.
All right, we're good. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's right.
No, of Steve and me.
The show must go on.
Object of our proposition.
It's showtime. Okay. The second half of the program, we have two more authors, and then we'll have some Q&A. Our next author is Reggie Owens. Reggie. Let me read your name. Sit down. 1 minute, sit down. Reggie Owens, a born and bred Chicagoan, is a prolific and passionate writer celebrated for his captivating storytelling and a deep understanding of the human experience. His love for literature bloomed at a young age, fostering a lifelong connection to the written word. Reggie's debut novel, The Lover Quarrel, created a growing following in the creation of Light Bright Publication. He is an avid reader, devouring the works of literary masters, including R.L. Stine, who would later shape his writing style. Please put your hands together for Reggie Owens.
Thank you so much. I just want to let you know that this is The Lover's Quarrel. It's a fiction book. It stars a young man named Nate Jones and his journey to find love. I'm actually going to be reading in the middle of the book, chapter 5. And here we go. New Flame. Nate notices a brown-skinned sister with a luxurious afro, alluring charm, and a smile as bright as the sun. Nate approaches with confidence and says, "Hello, pretty lady. I'm Nate. Do you mind if I get your name?" A bit startled, she turns to seize Nate, then smiles and realizes when a handsome stranger just complimented her. She replies, "Well, I'm Miguel," showing him an inviting smile. As they continue to chat and get to know each other, Nate noticed that she's wearing a storm charm necklace. "What's the meaning of your necklace?" asks Nate. Miguel explains that, "My necklace was given to me by my mother. It's an Ethiopian Harm family heirloom 4 generations long," and she touches it thoughtfully. She notices Nate's accent and asks him some questions such as, "Well, where are you from? And will you be visiting long?" Before Nate answers any of Wangel's questions, he has a few questions for himself, such as, "Well, where are the Harmon people located? And what's your culture and people about?" Wangel explains that her people live in the Omo River, the fertile part of southwest Ethiopia's Debub zone. Wangel further explains that her people place a tremendous value on cattle, but most of them are cattle farmers. Nate responds, "Well, that's cool. I'm from the United States, specifically Chicago. But I only been in Nigeria a few months." Nate is already feeling such an easy connection with this woman. And he asks her, "Well, what are you doing in Nigeria if you're originally from Ethiopia?" Wangel says, "My family moved from Ethiopia to Nigeria when I was a baby and searched for new opportunities. I'm also in school currently to become an accountant. Nate notices her biggest smile when she realizes she's very excited to be in school. Nate and one girl are engaged in a riveting conversation. They spend the next 3 hours talking. They discover interesting things about each other. They discuss the cultures, their long-term goals, the interest in starting a family, how many children they'd like to have. Then Nate asks, well, how was your mother and your father? One girl responds, my father's doing great, but my mother, she passed away from breast cancer 3 years ago. Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't know that. Nate responds, it's okay. You didn't mean any harm by it, says one girl. My father has remarried since my mother passed, and she makes sure to give Nate a reassuring smile. Nate is overcome with an innate feeling of comfort. He's positive he hasn't experienced this level of attraction or interest from any woman, like he feels when he's talking to one girl. Nate also senses an emotional stability coming from him that makes him want to pursue things even further. As the next few months pass, Nate is getting ready to head back to the United States, and he spends his final day in Nigeria with one girl at the lake. As they look into each other's eyes, there's a curious feeling in the air. Could it be love? Before they part ways, Nate leans in and they share a kiss that feels divine. They're both happy and they want things to continue, but Nate has to head back to the airport. I have to make my way back home. Do you have to leave so soon? One girl asks as she fights back tears. Yes, unfortunately, Nate says in a sad tone, but I promise I'm going to stay in contact. Nate gives her a big hug and heads to the airport to board his plane. Over a 16-hour flight, Nate finally makes his way back home ready to finish his old life. A couple of months pass and Nate is constantly thinking about one girl. It isn't long before he excitedly begins to plan his next trip to Nigeria. As he's researching ticket prices, he hears the sound of the doorbell, gets up to answer it. As he opens the door, there's nobody standing outside none other than Denise. Shock runs down Nate's face. He asks, what are you doing here, Denise? Can I come in? I have something important to tell you. Yes, sure, you can come on in. Nate walks in his house and he sits reluctantly, ready to listen. I made a huge mistake not accepting your request earlier. Nate listens to her explain her position on the matter. She admits that she was wrong for having dismissed them so abruptly when they were younger, and now ready to make things work. Nate looks at her with disgust and disbelief and asks, why should I take you back now that you're older, you're close to a high-risk pregnancy? That wouldn't be good for either of us. There could be so many complications for you or a baby. She responds, because we can still create something wonderful. And I'm sorry I didn't realize that initially. Nate is empathetic at this point to Denise's feelings, but he still has his heart set on one girl. He also makes it clear that his time with Denise is over. Nate patiently explains to Denise that the time has passed and he has moved on. Denise looks very dejected as she walks away. I will get you back, Nate Jones, she exclaims. As Nate closes the front door and hoping to finally end the chapter of his life. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Reggie. All right. Our final author tonight is Jay Bonansinga.
Well, you said it perfectly.
Yes. I told Jay I had a 70%
with very little practice
of getting his name right, and I did. I nailed it. So, with half a glass of wine, too. All right, enough about me. Jay Bonansinga is the New York Times best-selling author who has been called one of the most imaginative writers of thrillers by the Chicago Tribune. His novel, The Killer's Game, is now a major motion picture from Lionsgate Entertainment. Jay is also the co-author of the blockbuster Walking Dead novels, as well as more than 50 acclaimed short stories and 15 original novels and non-fiction works. Goodness.
Yeah.
His books and...
He's been busy.
Yeah, very busy.
Thank you, Dad.
That sounds like a story to me. His books and stories have been translated into 17 languages. Put your hands together for Jay Bonansinga.
Thank you. I'm going to read from a book that I wrote almost 30 years ago. It came out in 1997. I was able to read normal print, but You'll notice now I read large print. That's how long this book has been in development as a movie. But it finally came out last year, and I'm really proud of it. So if you have Amazon Prime Video, please look it up, The Killer's Game. I'm going to read a brief scene from the book, the original book. And just to give you context, it's about a Chicago hitman, a career contract killer, who at the beginning of the story, he learns he has leukemia. And so, instead of going into chemo or whatever, he just figures, I'm going to go out like a good hitman. I'm going to put hit on myself. So he puts a hit on himself, and then he finds out they got the blood samples mixed up. And his blood is normal. He's not going to die. In fact, his cholesterol looks pretty good. So, this scene is early in the book. He's trying to get out of Chicago, and he runs into a rival hitman in an Elvis mask on the L. I think that's about all the context you'll need, hopefully. And it goes like this. That you, Tony? Tony Alcada? Joe swung his .44 caliber around the edge of the bench. It ain't Doc Holliday, Elvis replies, his voice muffled by the plastic. He was snapping the Scorpion's cocking mechanism back, which sounded like an old cigarette lighter opening and closing. Joe knew Alcada was merely playing with him, trying to scare Joe. Alcada was one of the most bloodthirsty and prolific hitters in the Midwest. And when he was ready to take Joe down, he would do it in a big way. How you doing, Tony? Joe said, blindly aiming the Red Hawk around the bench. He squeezed the trigger. The Red Hawk's roar was a cherry bomb inside the train, a muzzle flash and a wet baritone that popped in Joe's ears and started them ringing again. The bullet punctured a divot through the far wall of the train, and Joe peeked under his bench in time to see Alcada, his Elvis mask, askew now, huddling behind the back of the seat, fiddling angrily with the button on the side of the Scorpion's breech block. Been a while, Slugger, Alcada said, straightening his mask. I figured you retired. Yeah, don't know what I'd do with myself, Joe said, mentally counting his remaining loads. 4 bullets left in the chamber. And then it was farewell and adieu. The train had picked up speed now and was screaming around a turn, swaying, blue sparks playing up around the windows. I appreciate the contest thing, Slugger, Alcada hollered from the far end of the car, his voice rising over the keening noise of the wheels. I got a daughter at home. She'll be a freshman at Northwestern. I need the money. Alcada leaned out into the aisle, aimed and fired another burst. The rear of the car lit up like the Chinese New Year, chasers of sparks curling along the floor, 7.65 millimeter needles puckering the metal. And Joe slammed against the corner, huddling behind the bench, sucking in a breath, eyes pressed shut, feeling the mist of debris on his face like cold sleet, and the bullets arcing over his head, firecracker sharp, poison snake deadly, 6 inches from his face. And he's wondering, how the hell am I going to get out of this one? Then it stopped. The clatter of the box magazine hitting the floor snapped Joe out of his shock. He realized it was time to act. The narrow window of opportunity was presenting itself. He swallowed nerves and leaned over the edge of the bench, trying to get the Italian's attention. What are you packing there, Tony? Is that an old Czech machine pistol? The voice from the other end was vaguely proud. It's my baby. You like it? Joe rolled his eyes. You get on a train where there's civilians around, kids, women, and you're shooting an antique automatic? That's typical outfit slop. Now Joe was leaning out into the aisle as he spoke, taking a good look at the distance between his bench and the other hitter. The dome lights flickered off again, the train rounding another curve. At the far end of the car, Elvis was hunkered behind the lead seat, muscling another box magazine into the Scorpion, cursing at the weapon, and all at once, Joe came up with an idea. A solution. In fact, it was mildly surprising to Joe that he hadn't thought of it at the moment Alcada had shown up. Do it quickly, Slugger, Joe's mind barked at him. The train's approaching Grand Avenue, and the brakes are coming on, and Alcada's going to be locked and loaded in a blink. Do it now, while you still have the chance. Joe leaned out across the floor, resting his shoulder on the corrugated iron, bracing the magnum with his elbow on the floor, drawing a bead on the bench, aiming at the spot directly over Alcata's chest. Then Joe held his breath and squeezed the trigger, and the lights came on again. The blast was deafening, an M80 inside a barrel. The bullet struck the front bench, dead center, piercing the fiberglass like a needle through flesh, penetrating instantly. There was an audible gasp, and Alcata was thrown back against the frame behind it. Blood rosettes bloomed across the wall, the blunt-nosed bullet lodging in Alcata's chest. Alcata slid to the floor, stunned. Joe rose to his aching feet, brushed himself off, grabbed his rucksack, and walked the length of the car. Wait a minute. What's this shit? Alcata was struggling for breath on the floor, blood filling his lungs. The Elvis mask had been blown clear, and now his face was revealed, his purple tanning booth complexion, his salt and pepper coiffure. He looked down at the window in his chest. He looked up at Joe. You had high velocity Teflons in that 44? Joe shrugged. Yeah, took it off of one of Ben Malambry's kids. Who knew? Alcata looked embarrassed. Slugger, I gotta ask you something. Yeah, Tony? The hitman was drowning in his own fluids, choking, struggling to get the words out. Will you do me one favor for old time's sake? Joe knelt and patted Alcata on the shoulder. Sure, Tony, whatever. The hitman looked up at him. Don't tell nobody, you know, how easy it was for you. Thank you.
Did you guys like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Can we hear it for our authors?
All authors.
I have a bunch of thank yous. We also have our raffle. We also the
You want to do the
Madison
Q&A?
Street- Oh yeah, but I'm just telling you what's coming. We have some books for sale that some are at the from the shop, except for Anne's 2 last clean kills, which I think you bought yourself. There's only 2, so you gotta get there first. And I think everyone else's books were yours. You're selling them here directly, or
Yeah, bro, I'm direct.
yeah. So Reggie and Ann are selling them, and the other ones they have in the store. So we're trying to help Madison Street Books sell more books, and help our authors sell more books, and help our students read more books. So there you go. We're gonna have time for some questions, and I'll let Steve handle that, and then we'll have the raffle, and I've got a lot of thank yous, so that'll take about an hour. But before that, questions.
All right. Questions for any of the authors?
Yeah, and I think the authors,
Should we stand up
I
and
was
face?
just gonna say,
Yeah,
why
why
don't you
not?
guys
Yeah.
stand up, and then,
I'll get up.
and, feel free to address your questions to anyone.
Raise your hand, and you got a
Raise your
question,
hand.
and
Steve is
I'll
teaching
repeat it.
them.
I'll repeat it if it's not loud enough.
Can we just give them one more big round of applause and see if they
Yeah. If any of you haven't tried to write a book, I can assure you it's really, really hard. And they've all done it. Some of them multiple times. So, okay, questions. Anything. There are no dumb questions.
Do you still get writer's block even after you've written many books?
Good question. Okay, let's take that one at a time. Jay.
Well, I mean, writer's block to me is just worrying that you're going to suck. And everybody sucks when they write a first draft, right? I mean, if that's a first draft is like the trash draft. You just got to keep powering through it. And also I think I'd like to hear from the other authors, but being an author is a little OCD. I mean, you just keep going no matter what. You feel guilty if you don't write, your 3 pages or 5 pages or whatever a day or a week or whatever your standard is.
Linda.
What do you folks think? You get
Well, no, and I say that in response to what you're saying. You just keep at it. In other words, like sometimes they say if you get writer's block, just start writing anything like I have writer's block, whatever. You just keep writing, and I wrote so many drafts of this book that got in trash. And I would write, and I wrote for so long where I didn't really know what I wanted the focus of the book to be. I mean, I knew it involved my family on the west side of Chicago, but I wasn't sure where I was going with it until I finally got glommed onto the redlining, and then I built the story of the family around that. But it's just just gotta keep going,
Reggie.
So I definitely agree with Linda and Jay. It's a process. So I know for me personally, me trying to finish the book, I suffer writer's block. And I got frustrated with myself because I'm like, I should be creative enough where I should know what I want to write. And for me, what worked for me was kind of stepping away from the book, stepping away from the project, giving myself time to think, and just allow the creative process or the creative muse to kind of come back. And it just kind of came like a strike of lightning for me, and I finished the book.
Howard.
I think that I was reading a book that Stephen King wrote on writing, and he said about write in terms of the situation that the characters are in at that moment. And I found that while you have to have an idea of how you're beginning, the middle, and the end of what you want to say, by focusing on the situation, I found that I was able to come up with a chapter by just focusing on that, and I got rid of my fear that, I'm not going to be able to finish this. So by using his advice, I thought it was a very good piece of advice.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think I've suffered from writer's block. I just like writing a lot. And I'm in a kind of a dead period right now. It's been a few months since I finished my newest book. And for various reasons, I haven't started on a new one, and I really miss it. So to me, getting up in the morning and getting those 2 or 3 hours in just makes me feel like I've had a day. And I mean, I'm probably a little overly worried about being productive, but that's how the books get written. They have to be productive. So I think writer's block is just such a amorphous thing that for everyone has their own story. But that was mine.
Great question.
Well said.
All right, next
I have a
question.
question
Oh,
back here.
okay, go
How
ahead.
many books have you written within your lifetime?
Oh, let's just hear numbers. Let's go the other direction.
Okay. I have finished 8 novels.
Wow. Howard.
I've written 2 novellas, political thrillers, and one-act play. But I'm originally a scientist, so I didn't start writing till much later in my life.
Extra credit.
So I don't have as many as everybody. I actually only finished 2. But
2.
Start.
You're young. You got a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Linda.
Yeah, well, I mean, Redlined is my book, and I might write another book one day about my mom, because I still have all this material, but this was the book that I wanted to write. I wrote it, and I'm happy with it.
That's fantastic.
I'm embarrassed to say that I've written 45 books and 35 of them have been published. That's a pretty good odds.
Yeah.
It's like 10 of them were terrible. 35.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right.
The 10 that didn't get published.
You had to bring that up.
Is there ever any desire to go back and what would you say was the
That's a good
difference
question.
between the ones that did get published and the ones that didn't, and if you ever wanted to go back and have another go at them?
Great question. The ones that didn't get published, I think, I might be wrong about this, but I think they were just me kind of imitating other authors, imitating other stories, you know what I mean? And when I came up with, my first very original story, it was in 1994 that it was sold. I was like, it's going to be all downhill from here, because it was, it was published by Warner Books. It had two publishers vying for it, and an auction, and then it sold to the movies, New Line Cinema, and then my childhood hero, George Romero, who made Night of the Living Dead, he signed on to direct the movie version of it, which never got made, which is a different side story. But I thought at the time, memo to myself, write original stuff, write stuff for yourself that you can't find. I tell my students, I teach creative writing at DePaul, and I tell them, the best reason to write is to write a story for yourself that you can't find. You can't find it on these shelves, and it matters to you. That's how I broke into the business.
That takes courage. Yeah, just the courage to be.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. No, it does. I know that. Okay, Rithvik.
I have a question about how you guys write characters. Do you guys imagine particular people, or do you guys like mix and match personality traits based on what story you're writing? How does that work?
I'm studying this right now, so I'll go first if you don't mind. I think I am, after 8 novels, I'm really starting to appreciate how well you need to know your character before you start putting that character on paper.
Yeah, good point.
I've just finished a book, historical fiction, and it's really an exciting book, but there's something missing, and what's missing is a fuller portrait of my protagonist. So I've been going back to school, myself, and reading a lot about it, but I would say to come up with a good character, you really need to do some preliminary work, like interview your character, have your character write a diary entry as if it was your character, write about various aspects of your character's life until you start feeling that you know that character backwards and forwards, and then start in with your book. And I think doing that, you'll get a much, the whole thing about character is that's what people remember about a book. They don't remember the plot as much. 2 years later, they remember the characters. So you really have to get that right to really draw people in and keep them in the book.
Especially in series fiction,
yes,
like you write. It's
I don't do a
important.
series, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This one's the first in a series, and that's the first time I've ever.
But you are going to write a series
Yeah.
based on that character. Yeah. Cool.
It's a really good character. I just want to say about Anne's books, I had the honor and privilege and pleasure and I think Betty, who was one of our volunteers over there, also read it. We got to read the manuscript.
Oh, of the new book.
Of the new book, and I'm not sure if the editors, I guess, know more, but I loved it. I read it in one sitting, like on a Sunday. I could not. All of her books I read in one sitting, because you cannot put them down. You have to find out what happens. I think there was one I didn't. I came into the office and saw it. I said, Anne, I'm trying to figure out the end. And it was just so much fun to talk to the author about their own book, while you're reading it. So,
Okay. Next question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I always thought the process of writing a book is you have the storyline pretty much figured out before pen hits paper. So I guess my question is, how much of that, how prepared are you before you start writing the book? Do you have the storyline figured out, or is there a lot of creative juices after, as you're going? What's kind of that happy medium, if you kind of discuss that?
Go ahead.
So for me personally, I knew what I wanted to write about. I knew the premise, the plot for the book, and I knew some of the characters, or the main character, main protagonist, antagonist for the book. But for me personally, as I'm writing the book, I'm thinking of new creative ideas, thinking of new creative characters, thinking of twists and turns to make the story more interesting.
Sure.
So for me, it's my creativity or the plot of the story comes out within the process.
A pantser, they're called.
Any other perspective on that?
Well, my book is a nonfiction book, so all these characters are real people. But what I had insight to was my mother started a diary when she was 10 years old, and she kept it up her entire life. My father wrote a diary when he was 19 and 20, and he started another one for 6 years when he was traveling. I have 13 years of letters between my parents when my dad was traveling. So I was able to, I could not have written this book without all this material. And I was so excited to find all this, but I had so much material. The problem was for me to try to figure out what is the essence of this story, because I could probably write 50 books, all with a different focus based on the material that I have. So that was for me, just filling in, letting these people's real words tell about them. And of course I knew them, but then there were my grandparents also kept diaries. So I mean, it was sort of amazing. So I was able to pull on all this material.
Great.
I think you do. I'll just say one real quick thing.
Sure,
I think I'm sort of, this is a gospel that I preach. You have to know the ending before you start. There's so many reasons, but maybe the most important reason is if you know the ending, then you know where it starts. If you don't know the ending, you really don't know where it starts.
Right.
Yeah, they say that writers fall into one of two characters, either they're outliners or they're pantsters, which is writing by the seat of your pants. And they seem to, they don't cross over very often. I actually have become an outliner with my last couple of books. I was always a pantster before, but as plots become more complicated, I don't think you can get away with that as well.
I mean, I'll just, as I write stories for the stage, and I don't know. I mean, it's my own life, but when I start a story, it's always inspired by some event or some person in my life that did something crazy, or me that did something crazy, usually me. But I don't know where the beginning, middle, or end either. Like for me, it's the process. And I would agree with Jay. Like I find the end. That's in the process. Like something crazy happened, and I'm like, okay, I need to get up on stage and tell everyone. And then I find the end, and then I work backward from there.
Sure.
It's. I mean, your life is like a series of minutes that turn into years,
Right.
and like all of it's interesting to you, but you've got to boil that down to like 10 minutes of something. It's hard. That's true stuff, like nonfiction. I don't know how fiction writers do it at all. Anyway, okay. Great question. Next question. You.
Yeah, so this is just for Linda. A lot has been written about like the Great Migration, and you even quote like Isabel Wilkerson's wonderful book, The Worth of Other Signs. How do you think about your book, sort of in conversation with everything else that has been written, like from Isabel Wilkerson or Baldwin or like other folks on the Great Migration?
This book is about my family's lives on the west side of Chicago before, during, and after the racial changes. And I see that this is a personal family story, so that there's lots of academic books that you can get, like The Color of Law, and read all about redlining. My book is not meant to be an academic book, but it's the story of a family based upon their real experiences and what they went through, as they anticipated racial change, as racial change occurred, as they stayed and other whites fled, and they managed apartment buildings. They had 3 small apartment buildings, a couple of 2 flats and a 6 flat, that they managed for 30 years after the neighborhood was devastated by the Martin Luther King uprisings or riots, however you want to rephrase that. So yeah, that's how I think it fits in. It's a personal story. It's somebody with boots on the ground when all this was happening.
Next question, Rich.
I think after this one more.
Okay.
As young boys and girls, when did you realize that I'm a writer? When was it in school? Was it outside of school, or an experience to say, I need to jot this down?
Okay, let's go. Yeah, everyone answer. Go ahead.
So for me, I actually discovered my love for writing a lot later in life. It was actually during COVID when I was looking for another job, and the world was kind of coming to an end. And I kind of was like, okay, I want to do something. Like I've always liked writing. I kind of did with that when I was younger, but 2020 was really the time for me to sit down. I could actually focus on it, and I realized, okay, this is my passion. This is what I love to do. This is what I'm going to dedicate my life to, my purpose. So it was a lot later in life as an adult, not necessarily a child.
Howard.
Originally, I liked poetry, to write poetry, like in high school. And then when I realized that very few people like to read poetry, then I decided to learn to write songs. So if you go to YouTube, you can hear different music of mine.
Yeah, I listened, it's good.
Thank you.
I knew, I found out reading about him, and, yeah, some nice.
And then eventually, you know, as I got older, I wanted to express different things that was important to me. And that's why in my books I tried to teach people about history, tried to make it interesting, and teach about certain things, a lot of injustice in the world.
And
God, I forgot the question
When did you know
writing?
you
Oh,
wanted to
yeah,
writing.
I was a late in life writer. I didn't start writing until I was 50 years old, but I was always a voracious
That was
reader.
about 2 months ago.
Yeah, 2 months ago. I was always a voracious reader, and it was, at some point, I read a series of books that I didn't think were very good, and the question came to my mind, can I do at least as well as this bad book? And so I just sat down and tried, and it came out, and so that's how I started.
Linda.
Well, I did write well when I was in grade school. My 8th grade teacher sent one of my pieces in about why my father should be Father of the Year, and it won a local prize about that. But I didn't really consider myself a writer. But what inspired me was actually all of this material that I had, and I felt there's a book here somewhere, but what is it? So I really spent years trying to figure out, you know, of all these thousands of pages of letters and diaries. And by the way, all of this stuff is at the Newberry if you ever want to know more about me than you ever wanted to know. All at the Newberry. So they wanted it. They said they had never seen a family collection like this, and they got 25 bankers boxes plus another 25 I added. So it's 50 bankers boxes of our family history at the Newberry Library. But I was inspired really by these letters and diaries and documents, and I just thought, I gotta write this. And I actually had to learn how to write this book.
Jay, when did you decide?
For me, it was in the mid-'60s, and I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I saw for the first time Rod Serling on TV, and I'm like, I want to be that guy. Seriously. And my mom even said, you know, he's a writer. He writes some of the shows, and I'm like, I'm in. And I started wearing black and smoking and talking like this. Up ahead, there's a sign. Out of the darkness. Twilight zone. Seriously, when I was a kid, and I've never wanted to do anything else.
They beat you up.
Yes, I got beat up a lot. Pretty good. Yeah.
All right.
It's true though. I'm not just making that up.
I believe you. I think, do we have time for one more?
One more.
One more question.
Really good one.
Oh, the pressure,
Really
the pressure.
good.
Yeah, wow. I saw a bunch of hands.
If the question's not good, the answer has to be good. These are creative people here.
I got a quick question for everybody that you can answer like in 3 seconds.
Okay.
What's everybody's latest favorite book?
James.
James?
Yeah, by the one I just showed you back.
Right.
The Alchemist.
Oh, that's
The Alchemist. Good.
Great book.
Howard?
We have Walter Tevis, the book on chess.
Oh, right. That was made into the series.
Queen's Gambit?
Queen's Gambit.
That was wonderful, right? And I felt very bad how he achieved so much fame. You know, he was a college professor. He achieved a lot of fame through novels being made into movies. the poor man died from terminal cancer at a relatively young age.
Right. Yeah.
I thought that was very sad.
I've actually bought. I contacted his widow and bought a piece of property that he wrote from him to make a movie out of it.
Oh,
He's a hero of mine.
Is that up and coming?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like it's sitting in a drawer. I haven't done anything with it yet, but I have the rights to it. Yeah.
I'm rereading Pride and Prejudice again.
Oh, wow.
They have my favorite book right here. Did we see it, Julie?
Yeah, go up one shelf, right.
Ah, this Fever House. This is my latest favorite book. If you want to just be scared, this is the scariest book I've ever read. Really.
All right.
Wow.
Okay. Okay. Well, can we hear it for our authors? I promise I won't take an hour to thank people. First of all, I want to thank all of you. You know, we couldn't do this event without you.
Pleasure.
You are the event, and no one asked me to pay them to come here, so.
Hey, wait a minute.
I was misinformed.
I just want to rave about you guys for a few minutes. And I also want to mention, I'm not sure you got it, but Reggie has his own publishing house called Light Bright.
That's great.
And so we're really proud to have him on our associate board. He's a member. He organized this event. So a special thank you. He's just a wonderful man. We have volunteers, associate board members, we have people working on the gala here. Literacy Chicago is kind of like a great big family, and we'd love for all of you to join in however you can. Okay, I have to do this one little pitch. If you know anyone who has like a really lot of money and they don't know what to do with it, please send them our way. Okay, Corey knows somebody.
No, I said tell them to talk to me as the sponsorship chair.
Corey's a sponsorship. He's our sponsorship chair, associate board. But you know, if you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, with the current situation, we're trying to get somebodies, you know, who still believe that adults need education. It's not too late. You can still change your life. Doesn't matter what time. We have people who come in and start learning to read at 70, 80 years old. And it's not too late, you know. They can still change their lives. They can still have better lives through education. And for me, that's the best part about Literacy Chicago. I'm so grateful to Rich Dominguez to let me have this position. He teases me a lot, but underneath, if you hear him teasing me, it's just teasing me. We're really good. And I want to thank Madison Street Books. Yes. Woo! Let's hear it. Buy some books while you're here. And I'm probably forgetting to thank some people. I want to thank Susie and Michelle back there at the front desk. Woo! These two women are absolutely amazing. And you guys can sit down for a minute because I'm gonna do something I did not plan for 1 second ago, and Susie knows what it is. I'm gonna ask Susie to come up here and just say a few words. Susie will do something.
I know better than to talk back to Joy.
I know that Susie's gonna. I want her to talk about something because Susie and Michelle, you should be here, standing here. Come on. So we're planning an amazing gala, and the other day, a few weeks ago, I asked Susie and Michelle, would you be interested in organizing our event? And they said, yes. So
you say no to Joanne.
Okay, give me some money. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm not. But you have to say you're kidding when you ask somebody for money, right? But you're really not kidding. And the money isn't really for me. It's for our students and our organization because we really want to
keep going. We're only 57. We could keep it. So I wanted to ask Susie and Michelle just to give a good sales pitch about our gala. They are doing the most amazing things. I mean, this is just mind-blowing.
Okay, coming up June 5th at the Glessner House, we are having a gala. There's a big discussion about how to say that around here. I'm from Texas, so I say gala. And then, Francis can't hear me. Coming up on June 5th, we are having a gala, or a gala. Where you're from. We will have a speaker, and we will have food, and we will have lots of flowers, and it's called Literacy in Bloom, and we would love for you to come join us in supporting Literacy Chicago. All the money goes to support literacy training, ESL, help me out here, GED, citizenship, and then workforce skills. We literacy partners with other workforce development organizations in Chicago to help build workforce skills for folks who are looking for that.
Yeah, we are helping how many people a year just with job search?
Last year we served 840, and the ones who were part of the programs in regards to the carpentry and culinary, I'll say like 240, 250.
Yeah, so, you know, we have a small staff, but it's funny, people who come, Rich has the passion, and it just goes down. It went through me, and now I'm spreading it, and it's just a wonderful place. And I always say I won't retire until my head gives out or my body gives out. I'll know when my body gives out. Rich will have to tell me when my head gives out. I probably won't know.
So tickets will be on sale soon. And if you are interested, you're welcome to stop at the desk and make sure that I have your email, and I'll be happy to send you more information about it. We have just sent our initial save the date, so consider this your save the date for June 5th.
And we're starting to get some interesting prizes. The woman who is doing we have to mention
Yes, there'll be a silent auction and a raffle, and one of our first sponsors is Ella's Essence out of Evanston, is a florist, and they are underwriting the entire floral bill, and they are, which is nice, very nice.
Which they did last year if you were there, but this year it's...
And then they're also going to offer a floral arranging party with more details to come, but
for
that
students.
for the students, but also as an auction. Ella's Essence, and it's in Evanston.
Yeah. Right on Hinman and
So they
know them? You know Ella and Bobby?
I don't know her personally. I know.
They are amazing people. They did all the flowers for us last year at the last minute. And this year, we decided to choose, we're going to have Literacy Bloom every year because we love the idea of blooming. And so every year we'll have focus on a different flower. And this year, it's yellow roses and then... Oh, we did. You're first to know. Don't tell everybody. But we will. And yours? Okay, so if it gets out about yellow roses, we know who said it. But Ella, in a meeting with her, she said, oh, that's a good idea. Next year we'll do this flower, and the year after that we'll do this flower, and then we'll do that. So she's a true partner, and she really believes in us, and she's an amazing lady. So, thank you. Should we have Rich come up here and pull 2 tickets with amazing prizes? And then you can buy books, talk to the authors for about, 25 minutes or so. All right. So, I don't know if you saw, but I've been standing here mixing them. So, like, even if you came in at the beginning, I've been mixing them for about 5 minutes. So what's the first prize?
The books.
The books. So we have a bag of books. And the number is
50665517.
All
right.
I think the bag is down there. And you can get it signed by all the authors. Okay, congratulations, Vasilios is Howard's son. So I think it's fitting that he won, okay. You're tall.
506653. That's all I'm talking. 737.
It's you?
Oh.
Is it you or Kay?
It's Kay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we will give it to her, and she will be thrilled.
She will be proud.
Kay is a former member of our associate board, and we called her and said, would you like to work on the gala? And she said, sure. And she was here, and she'll be thrilled to have 1-2 tickets.
Yes. Yes.
Because we were planning to ask her to come work there, but you know.
Do you want me to hand this to Vasilios?
Yeah, give that one to Vasilios. And Vasilios, you can get them all signed. Does anyone have anything they want to say before we stand up and, any final comments?
Thank you.
How do you feel?
Great.
What's another word to see? You can't say tired, you can't say hungry. Shout out some words how you feel after hearing these things.
Inspired.
Inspired. What else? Enriched.
Entertained.
Entertained. Interested. Any more? Come on.
Awesome sauce.
Awesome. I think awesome says it all, right?
Yeah.
All right, so
Awesome sauce.
awesome sauce. So
Yeah.
we still, you can, let's see, is the bar still open? Yeah, you have, is the bar still open? It's 10 to 8.
10 minutes. 8
So
minutes.
you'd have to
You gotta
chug
chug
it down. So thank you everyone.
Thanks for coming.